Readings of Almighty God's Words. The responsibilities of leaders and workers. The responsibilities of leaders and workers. 5. At the last gathering, we fellowshipped on item 5 of the responsibilities of leaders and workers. In the course of fellowshipping on item 5, we dissected some of the manifestations and actions of false leaders, and we finished fellowshipping on this item. Today, we are fellowshipping on items 6 and 7 of the responsibilities of leaders and workers. What is the specific content of these two items?
Item 6. Promote and cultivate all manner of qualified talent, so that all who pursue the truth can have the opportunity to train and enter the truth reality as soon as possible. Item 7. Allocate and make use of different types of people sensibly, based on their humanity and strengths, such that each is put to their best use.
Let us then dissect the various actions and manifestations of false leaders with regard to these two items. These two items belong to the same category, which concerns the Church's promotion, cultivation, and use of all kinds of people. Let us first fellowship on the principles of God's house in promoting and cultivating all manner of qualified talent. That way, won't you then basically be able to understand some of the principles that leaders and workers should adhere to when doing this work? You may think, as leaders and workers, we often come into contact with these matters. We are already familiar with this work and have some experience of it. So even if you said nothing more about it, we are clear about it, and you don't need to specifically fellowship on it further. So, is there no need to fellowship on it?
We need your fellowship on it. We still don't grasp the principles in this regard, and there are some talented people that we still don't know how to discern.
Most leaders and workers are still very confused about how to do this job, and are in the process of feeling their way around it, and cannot grasp the precise principles. So we still need to fellowship about the details. Why does God's house promote and cultivate all kinds of talented people? Is promoting and cultivating all kinds of talented people for the sake of engaging in science, education, and literature? God's chosen people should all already know that when God's house promotes and cultivates various types of talented people, this is not done in order to manufacture some sort of high-tech product and create a miracle, or to conduct research into the history of human development, and much less to make any sort of plans for the future of mankind. Why then does God's house promote and cultivate all kinds of talented people? Do you understand this or not?
In order to spread the gospel of the kingdom.
In order to spread the gospel of the kingdom. This is one reason. What else is there?
So everyone who pursues the truth can have the opportunity to train.
That's right. This answer is quite reasonable and hits the mark. It is so that even more people who pursue the truth can have the opportunity to train and enter into the truth reality as soon as possible. Both of the answers that you gave just now are correct and accurate. The promotion and cultivation of all kinds of talented people by God's house, in one respect, relates to the spreading of the gospel of the kingdom and to the work of God, and in another respect, it relates to individual pursuits and entry. These are the two overarching aspects. Specifically speaking, what is the significance of God's house promoting and cultivating all kinds of talented people? Specifically, what work is done in the church by these people who are promoted and cultivated? When God's house promotes and cultivates a person to be a team leader, supervisor, or a church leader or worker, are they being made an official? God's house promotes and cultivates people so that they can be responsible for specific projects or jobs within the church's various items of work, such as gospel work, text-based work, film production work, watering work, as well as some general affairs, and so on. So, how do they carry out these specific jobs? By undertaking various items of church work in accordance with God's requirements, the truth principles of God's words, and the work arrangements of God's house, and thereby doing their duty according to God's requirements, and acting in accordance with the truth principles. Looking at the fact that these people are being promoted and cultivated to undertake work, it is not having an official title or status that enables them to do their work well. Rather, they must possess a certain caliber in order to shoulder a specific job, that is, to shoulder what God has entrusted them to do, or, in other words, a duty and obligation that carries responsibility. This is the specific significance and definition of promoting and cultivating various types of talented individuals, as mentioned in Item 6 of the responsibilities of leaders and workers. Therefore, in promoting and cultivating people, the aim of God's house is to cultivate all kinds of talented people to do the various items of church work well, in accordance with God's requirements and the work arrangements of God's house. It is to enable these people to shoulder various specific tasks of the church. At the same time, God's house cultivates and trains these people so that they learn how to contemplate God's words, fellowship on the truth, and act according to principles, leading them to practice the truth and live by God's words, and enter into the truth reality, and enabling them to have true experiences and testimonies, after which they can lead, water, and supply others, and do the various items of the church work well, and at the same time, God's chosen people can be enabled to submit to God, testify to God, and fulfill the duty of preaching the gospel. The method of practice for promoting and cultivating all kinds of talented people is, in one respect, to lead people in practicing and experiencing God's words, coming to know themselves, casting off their corrupt dispositions, and entering into the truth reality. In another respect, it is for the leaders and workers to use their own real experience of loyalty and submission to lead and cultivate people in fulfilling their duties and giving resounding testimonies to God. These are the two major paths of practice for cultivating various kinds of talented people. This is the specific work involved in promoting and cultivating various kinds of talented people, and it is also the true significance of promoting and cultivating them. Who do the various kinds of talented people promoted and cultivated by the church refer to? What ambits does that encompass? First is the type of people who can be supervisors of the various items of work. What are the required standards for supervisors of the various items of work? There are three main ones. First, they must have the ability to comprehend the truth. Only those who can comprehend the truth purely without distortion and draw inferences are people of good caliber. People of good caliber must at the very least have spiritual understanding and be able to eat and drink the words of God independently. In the process of eating and drinking God's words, they must be able to independently accept the judgment, chastisement, and pruning of God's words, and seek the truth in order to resolve their own notions and imaginings and the adulteration of their own will, as well as their corrupt dispositions. If they reach this standard, it means they know how to experience the work of God, and this is a manifestation of good caliber. Secondly, they must carry a burden for the church's work. People who truly carry a burden don't just have enthusiasm. They have true life experience, understand some truths, and they can see through to some problems. They see that in the church's work and God's chosen people, there are many difficulties and problems that need to be resolved. They see this with their eyes and worry about it in their hearts. This is what it means to carry a burden for the church's work. If someone is merely of good caliber and capable of comprehending the truth, but they are lazy, covet the comforts of the flesh, aren't willing to do real work, and only do a bit of work when the above issues them a deadline for its completion, when they can't get away with not doing it, then this is a person who carries no burden. People who carry no burden are people who do not pursue the truth, people with no sense of justice, and good-for-nothings who spend all day stuffing their faces without giving serious thought to anything. Thirdly, they must possess work capability. What does work capability mean? Simply put, it means that not only can they assign work and give people instructions, but they can also identify and solve problems. This is what it means to possess work capability. In addition, they also need organizational skills. People with organizational skills are particularly adept at bringing people together, organizing and arranging work, and solving problems. And when arranging work and solving problems, they can thoroughly convince people and make them obey. This is what it means to have organizational skills. Those who truly have work capability can carry out specific jobs arranged by God's house, and can do so swiftly and decisively without any sloppiness. And moreover, they can do the various jobs well. These are the three standards of God's house for cultivating leaders and workers. If someone meets these three standards, they are a rare, talented individual and should be promoted, cultivated, and trained straight away. And after practicing for a period of time, they can then take on the work. Whoever has caliber, carries a burden, and possesses work capability doesn't need people to always worry about them and supervise and urge them in their work. They are proactive. They know which jobs should be done at what time, which jobs to inspect and supervise, and which jobs need to be checked up on or watched closely. They are well aware of these things. Such people are relatively dependable and reliable in their work, and no major problems will occur. Even if problems do occur, they will be trivial issues that do not affect the big picture, and God needn't worry about the work that these people do. Only those who can really stand on their own 2 feet in their work truly possess work capability. Those who cannot stand on their own 2 feet and always need others to worry about them, keep an eye on them, supervise them, and even hold their hand and teach them what to do are the type of people who have extremely poor caliber. The results of the work that people with ordinary caliber do are definitely ordinary, and these people need others to keep an eye on them and supervise them before they can do anything. By contrast, people with good caliber can stand on their own 2 feet after they have been trained for a period of time, and every time the above has given them instructions for a task and fellowshipped some principles, they can grasp the principles, execute the work in accordance with them, and basically follow the right course without too great deviations or flaws, and achieve the results they're supposed to. This is what it means to possess work capability. For example, God's house calls for the church to be cleansed, and for antichrists and evil people to be identified and expelled from the church. And the type of people who possess work capability basically do not deviate while carrying out this task. Once an antichrist has appeared, it takes around half a year at the very least for them to be revealed and cleared out. During this time, those who possess work capability can identify them, fellowship on the truth to dissect the Antichrist's manifestations, and help the brothers and sisters gain discernment of them and not be misled, thereby enabling them to rise up to expose and expel the Antichrist together. When antichrists or evil people appear in the scope of the work of people who possess work capability, basically, most of the brothers and sisters do not get misled or influenced. Only a few muddle-headed people, and those of very poor caliber, are misled, and this is a normal phenomenon. People who are of good caliber and who possess work capability can achieve these results in their work, and such people are possessed of the truth reality and are up to standard leaders and workers. Among the various types of talented people I mentioned just now, the first type was those who can be supervisors of the various items of work. The first requirement for them is that they have the ability and caliber to comprehend the truth. This is the minimum requirement. The second requirement is that they carry a burden. This is indispensable. Some people comprehend the truth more quickly than ordinary people, have spiritual understanding, are of good caliber, possess work capability, and after practicing for a period of time, can absolutely stand on their own 2 feet. But there is a serious problem with these people. They carry no burden. They like eating, drinking, having fun, and gallivanting around. They are so interested in these things, but if they're asked to do some specific work that requires them to suffer hardship and pay a price, and restrain themselves a bit, they grow listless and claim that they have some ailment or affliction, and that every part of them feels uncomfortable. They are unrestrained and undisciplined, casual, headstrong, and dissolute. They eat, sleep, and have fun whenever they want, and only do some work when the mood takes them. If the work is a bit hard or tiring, they lose interest and no longer want to do their duty. Is this carrying a burden? People who are lazy and covet the comforts of the flesh are not the ones who should be promoted and cultivated. There are also people whose caliber is more than adequate for a job, but unfortunately, they just don't carry a burden. They don't like to take on responsibility. They don't like trouble, and they don't like worrying. They are blind to the work that needs doing, and even if they can see it, they don't want to take care of it. Are people of this type candidates for promotion and cultivation? Absolutely not. People must carry a burden in order to be promoted and cultivated. Carrying a burden can also be described as having a sense of responsibility. Having a sense of responsibility is more to do with humanity. Carrying a burden relates to one of the standards God's house uses for measuring people. Those who carry a burden while additionally possessing two other things, the ability and caliber to comprehend the truth and work capability, are the type of people who can be promoted and cultivated. And this type of people can be supervisors of the various items of work. These are the required standards for promoting and cultivating people to become various types of supervisors. And people who meet these standards are candidates for promotion and cultivation. Besides the type of people who can be supervisors of the various items of work, another type of people who can be promoted and cultivated are those who possess special talents or gifts, or have mastered some professional skills. What is the standard that the house of God requires for cultivating people like this into team leaders? First, look at their humanity. So long as they relatively love positive things and are not evil people, that's enough. Some people might ask, why are they not required to be someone who pursues the truth? Because team leaders are not church leaders or workers, nor are they waterers, and requiring them to meet the standard of pursuing the truth would be asking too much, and out of reach for most of them. This is not required of people who perform general affairs work or specific items of professional work. If it was, only a few would qualify, so standards have to be lowered. As long as people understand their profession and are capable of shouldering the work, and do not commit evil or cause any disturbance, then that's enough. For these people, who have expertise in some skills and professions and have some strengths, if they are going to carry out work that requires some familiarity with skill and relates to their professions in the house of God, as long as they are relatively guileless and upstanding in terms of their character, not evil, not distorted in their comprehension, able to endure hardship, and willing to pay a price, then that's enough. Thus, The first requirement for cultivating such people to be team leaders is that they must relatively love positive things. And in addition, they must be able to suffer hardship and pay a price. What else is there? Their character must be relatively upstanding. They must not be evil people, and they must not be distorted in their comprehension. Some people might ask, so can their ability to comprehend the truth be considered high? After hearing the truth, can they awaken to the truth reality and enter into the truth reality? There is no need to require all of this. It is sufficient to require that such people are not distorted in their comprehension. When people who are not distorted in their comprehension do their work, one of the benefits is that they are not likely to cause disruptions or do anything ridiculous. For example, God's house has fellowshipped over and over about the principles regarding the color of actors' costumes, which should be dignified and decent, and colorful rather than drab. Yet there are still those who simply cannot make sense of what they are told, do not understand what they hear, are incapable of comprehending, and are unable to identify the principles within these requirements of God's house, and they end up selecting costumes that are all gray. Isn't this a distorted comprehension? This is what it means to have a distorted comprehension. What does it mainly mean to relatively love positive things?
Being able to accept the truth.
That's right. It means being able to accept words and things that accord with the truth, and being able to accept and submit to God's words and all aspects of truth. Regardless of whether such people can put these things into practice, at the very least, deep down, they must not be resistant to or disgusted by them. Such people are good people, and colloquially, it can be said that they are decent people. What are the characteristics of decent people? They feel disgust, revulsion, and loathing toward the evil acts that non-believers like to commit, as well as toward the evil trends that non-believers follow. For example, trends in the world of non-believers advocate evil forces, and many women pursue marrying someone rich or being someone's mistress. Is this not wicked? People who love the truth find these things particularly repugnant, and some say, even if I couldn't find someone to marry, even if I was dying of poverty, I would never act like one of those people. In other words, they are disdainful and contemptuous of such people. One characteristic of decent people is that they find evil trends repugnant and revolting, and are disdainful of those who have been ensnared by such trends. These people are fairly upstanding. At the mention of believing in God and being a good person, walking the right path, fearing God and shunning evil trends, and shunning all the evil behavior in the world, deep down, they feel that this is something good. Whether or not they are able to step up to achieving all this, and irrespective of how great their aspiration is to believe in God and walk the right path, when all is said and done, deep down they yearn to live in the light and yearn to be in a place where righteousness holds power. Upstanding people like this are the type who fairly love positive things. those who are to be promoted and cultivated by God's house must, at the very least, possess the character of an upstanding humanity and of a love for positive things. This is also the first required standard for promoting the type of talented people who have professional skills and strengths. The second standard is that such people must be able to suffer hardship and pay a price. That is, when it comes to causes or work about which they are passionate, they are able to put aside their own desires, put aside the pleasures of the flesh or a comfortable lifestyle, and even forsake their own future prospects. Moreover, a little hardship or feeling somewhat tired is not a big deal to them, as long as they are doing something meaningful and which they believe to be right. Then they gladly forsake fleshly pleasures and benefits, or, at the very least, have the aspiration and wish to do so. Some people say, sometimes that person still covets the comforts of the flesh. Sometimes they want to sleep in, or to eat good food, and sometimes they want to go out for a wander or to goof around. But most of the time they are able to suffer hardship and pay a price. It's just that sometimes their mood leads them to such thoughts. Would this be considered a problem? It would not. It would be asking too much to demand that they completely put aside the pleasures of the flesh, except in special circumstances. In general, when you give such people a job to do, whether it is a big job or not, and whether or not it is something they like to do, and no matter how difficult the job is, or how great the hardship they have to bear, or what price they have to pay, as long as you assign it to them, they are guaranteed to do it to the best of their ability, even without you needing to keep an eye on them or supervise them. Such people can suffer hardship and pay a price, and this is another manifestation of decent people. What does it mean to be able to suffer hardship and pay a price? It means being thorough, being extremely devoted and attentive, and being willing to suffer any hardship and pay any price in order to get things done properly. Such people, when it comes to getting things done, keep their promises and are dependable, unlike people who are gluttonous and idle, love leisure and loathe labor, and put profit before everything. Those people go back on their promises, constantly speak false words to deceive and coax others, and do not hesitate to lie and take false oaths in order to achieve their goals. God will not save those people. God likes honest people. Only honest people keep their word and are loyal to their duties, and only those who can suffer hardship and pay a price to fulfill God's commission can be saved by God. Being able to suffer hardship and pay a price is the second characteristic and manifestation that one should possess in order to be promoted and cultivated by God's house. The third standard is not being distorted in one's comprehension. That is, after listening to God's words, they are at least able to know what the words refer to. They can make sense of what God says, and there is no deviation or absurdity in their comprehension. For example, if you talk about the color blue, they will not misconstrue it as black, and if you talk about the color gray, they will not misconstrue it as purple. This is the bare minimum. Even if sometimes their comprehension is distorted, when others point this out, they can accept it. And if they see that someone else has a purer comprehension than themselves, they can readily accept it. This type of person has a pure comprehension. Fourthly, they must not be evil people. Is this easy to understand? Not being an evil person means having to do one thing at the very least, which is that after failing to achieve what was asked of them by God's house, or having violated the principles and done something wrong, such people must be able to accept and submit when being pruned, without resistance and without spreading negativity or notions. In addition, no matter what group they are in, they can get along with most people and engage with them in harmony. Even when someone hurts them by saying something unpleasant, they can put up with it without keeping scores. And if anyone bullies them, they don't punish evil with evil, but instead they just adopt wise ways to keep their distance and steer clear. Although such individuals fall short of being honest people, at the very least, they are fairly guileless and don't commit evil. And if anyone offends them, they don't retaliate or torment the other person, nor suppress them. Moreover, such people don't try to establish their own independent kingdoms, act in opposition to the house of God, spread notions about God, try to pass judgment on Him, or do anything disruptive or cause disturbances. The 4 points above are the basic criteria for promoting and cultivating talented people who have some strengths and who understand some professional skills. As long as they fulfill these 4 criteria, they can basically shoulder certain duties and perform certain jobs in the proper manner. Some people may ask, how come the criteria that talented people should meet in order to be promoted and cultivated don't include understanding the truth, possessing the truth reality, and being able to fear God and shun evil? How come they don't include being able to know God, being able to submit to God, being loyal to God, and being an up-to-standard created being? Have these things been left behind? Tell me, if someone understands the truth and has entered the truth reality and is able to submit to God and is loyal to God and has a God-fearing heart and moreover knows God, will not resist Him, and is an up-to-standard created being, do they still need to be cultivated? If they truly have achieved all this, isn't the result of cultivation already accomplished? Therefore, the requirements for talented people to be promoted and cultivated don't include these criteria. Because candidates are promoted and cultivated from among human beings who do not understand the truth and who are full of corrupt dispositions, it is therefore impossible for these candidates who are being promoted and cultivated to already have the truth reality, or to already fully submit to God, let alone to already be absolutely loyal to God. And they are certainly further still from knowing God and having a God-fearing heart. The criteria that all kinds of talented people should meet above all in order to be promoted and cultivated are the ones we just mentioned. These are the most realistic and specific ones. Some false leaders say, We don't have any talented people here who can be promoted and cultivated. So-and-so doesn't understand the truth. So-and-so does things without a God-fearing heart. So-and-so cannot accept being pruned. So-and-so has no loyalty, and so on, picking out a whole bunch of faults. What are these false leaders implying by saying these things? It's as if those people cannot be promoted and cultivated because they don't understand the truth and don't experience God's work and don't yet have the truth reality, and so on, whereas the leaders themselves were able to become leaders because they already have some practical experience and possess the truth reality. Isn't that what these false leaders mean? In their eyes, no one is as good as them, and no one besides themselves is suitable to be a leader. This is the arrogant disposition of false leaders. When it comes to the promotion and cultivation of people by God's house, they are full of notions and imaginings. I just mentioned two kinds of people that God's house focuses on cultivating. One kind is people who can be leaders and workers, and the other kind is people who can undertake various professional jobs. There is also another type of person. They cannot be said to possess particular strengths or professional skills. Their work does not involve any advanced technology. That is to say, these people perform certain general affairs work in the church. They deal with certain matters extraneous to the church's substantive work. They are the type of people who carry out general affairs work. What are the house of God's chief requirements for such people? The most critical requirement is that they are able to defend the interests of God's house. Do not help outsiders at the expense of God's house, and do not sell out the interests of God's house in order to ingratiate themselves with Satan. That is all. Regardless of whether they are a gifted communicator, the cream of society, or a special talent, they should be able to defend the interests of God's house when handling external affairs for God's house. What do the interests of God's house include? Money, materials, the reputations of God's house and the church, and the safety of the brothers and sisters. Each of these aspects is very important. Whoever is capable of defending the interests of God's house is possessed of normal humanity and sufficiently upstanding, and someone who is willing to practice the truth. Some people have no discernment and say, "There is a person with an evil humanity, but they can defend the work of God's house." Is that possible? How can evil people defend the work of God's house? They can only defend their own interests. Thus, if someone is genuinely able to defend the interests of God's house, they are certain to be of good character and humanity. This cannot be wrong. If someone helps outsiders at the expense of God's house when doing things for God's house, and betrays its interests, and not merely causes great economic and material losses to God's house, but also wreaks huge damage to the reputations of God's house and the church, are they a good person? Such people are most certainly not good things. They do not care how great material and financial losses God's house suffers. What matters most to them is benefiting themselves and ingratiating themselves with non-believers. They not only send non-believers gifts, but even constantly make concessions to them during negotiations. It hasn't occurred to them to fight for the interests of God's house. And yet, they lie to God's house, saying how they accomplished the work and defended the interests of God's house, when in fact, the church's work has already suffered losses, and God's house has been greatly taken advantage of by the non-believers. If, in every regard, a person is able to defend the interests of God's house when handling external matters, is this person a good person?
Yes.
And so, if this kind of person is incapable of doing any other work in God's house, and is only suitable for this type of general affairs work, should they be promoted by God's house?
Yes.
In addition to possessing work capability and being able to carry out their work in accordance with the principles required by God's house, they are also able to defend the interests of God's house, so they are up to standard, and such people should be promoted. On the flip side, those who constantly cause harm to the interests of God's house, who constantly pose a potential risk to the safety of the brothers and sisters, and who constantly cause adverse effects and consequences for the reputations of God's house and the church. Such people are not to be promoted or cultivated. If they are promoted and used, they must be quickly dismissed. There are also some people who always get into trouble while doing their jobs, such as by getting into accidents when driving, messing up the affairs they handle, or bringing about conflict that results in constant complaints. And if there are any flaws, they don't know how to fix them. Such people are feeble-minded and also bringers of bad luck and wastrels. If this type of person becomes a team leader, supervisor, leader, or worker, not only must they be quickly dismissed, but they must also be cleared out of the church. This is because this kind of person is a recipe for disaster and a bringer of bad luck. As long as one or two of these people exist in the church, there can be no peace in the church. Such people seem to have evil spirits within them, or to have the plague. Whoever comes into contact with them will suffer misfortune, so this kind of person should be rooted out without delay. Even the facial characteristics of these people are all wrong, full of crafty or devilish features, or hideously ugly, and anyone who comes into contact with them will feel as if something bad is about to happen. People of this type must be dismissed and cleared out, and only then can things go well for the church. Promoting and cultivating various people in the church requires adherence to principles and the exercise of discernment, so as to act in accordance with the principles. Among the various types of people who are promoted and cultivated, there are those who serve as church leaders and workers, those who are responsible for various professions in the church, and also those who handle general affairs for the church. The various criteria that these several types of talented people should meet have also been fellowshipped on clearly. When you are clear on the principles of how to elect leaders and workers, and how to promote and cultivate people, then all of the church's work will enter onto the right track. Some people may ask, why are these people who are promoted and cultivated by God's house called talented? The talented people we talk about refer to candidates for promotion and cultivation. There are different requirements for people who can do different duties, and because they are in the process of being promoted and cultivated, it's therefore quite enough that these so-called talented people can meet those criteria we just mentioned. It would be unrealistic to expect these people to already have the truth reality, to already be submissive and loyal, and to already fear God. Thus, the talented people we talk about are merely those who possess some of the qualities and integrity that people with normal humanity should have, and the caliber to comprehend the truth. As such, they are considered qualified. It does not mean that they have already understood the truth and entered the truth reality, nor does it mean that they have already attained absolute submission to God after accepting His judgment and chastisement, and things like this. Of course, the term talented people does not refer to those who have attended university or pursued a PhD, or people with privileged family backgrounds, or elevated social status, or people with special abilities or gifts. It does not refer to these people. Since they are to be promoted and cultivated, some of the people who are going to perform professional work may have never done that profession or studied it before, but as long as they meet those several criteria for promotion and cultivation, and are willing to learn and good at learning a particular profession, then God's house can promote and cultivate them. What do I mean by this? I don't mean that a person can be promoted and cultivated only if they naturally excel at a particular profession. Rather, it is that if they have the inclination to learn and possess the conditions, or even if they just possess some basics in this profession, then they can be promoted and cultivated. This is the principle. Here ends our fellowship on the criteria that should be met by the various talented people that God's house wants to promote and cultivate.